Hey folks, Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense. Today I want to talk to you guys about choosing a holster, which is frequently asked question number 2 right behind what kind of gun should I buy. Now, the first thing you want to consider when you go to pick out a holster is it needs to fully cover the trigger guard. Any holster you get needs to fully cover the trigger guard. So the trigger on the gun is what makes the gun go bang. So you don't want anything getting inside that trigger guard and manipulating that trigger and causing a negligent discharge when you're carrying the gun. So any holster that you pick out needs to fully envelop, fully cover that trigger guard. So there should be no portion of the trigger guard exposed. There should be no way that any foreign object could get into and manipulate that trigger. All right. And not only that, if it fully covers the trigger guard, the material that covers the trigger guard needs to be sufficiently rigid so that you couldn't accidentally have something brush up against it and get stuck in there and manipulate the trigger or something like that. So you see some of these like corset holsters and stuff for women that are made out of really flimsy material. You want to make sure that that material isn't so flimsy that you could easily jam something in there and manipulate the trigger. So it needs to be a good rigid material that fully covers the trigger guard for it to be a good quality holster. The second thing you're going to look for is it needs to adequately retain the weapon. It needs to have adequate retention. Now, that doesn't mean that it needs to have level 1, level 2, level 3 retention with straps and buttons and all that kind of stuff unless you're openly carrying a gun, which I don't recommend unless it's part of your job as a law enforcement officer or security personnel. But if you're an average concealed carry armed citizen, then you don't really need to worry about that level of retention for a concealed carry holster. But what I'm talking about with retention is it needs to keep the gun generally in the same place. You don't want the gun flopping around while you're walking around and doing your day-to-day activities. So if you go buy like the cheapo Uncle Mike's holster that you can get at Walmart and you spend $15 on it, you're going to get every bit of what you paid for. You're going to have a $15 cheapo piece of crap holster and the gun's going to flop around inside of it and it's not going to be comfortable. So fully covers the trigger guard and retains the weapon adequately so that it doesn't flop around and move around and constantly change position when you're carrying it on a daily basis. You want to know where that gun is and needs to stay in relatively the same position all the time when you're carrying it. So after you've figured out those two things, you got a weapon holster that fully covers the trigger guard and retains the weapon. You want to think about comfort at that point. So if you think about your body like a clock and you think of your center line right where your zipper is as 12 o'clock, that's going to be what you're going to base your carry off of. So the closer you get to 12 o'clock, your center line, the more efficient your presentation from the holster is going to be when you practice presenting the gun from the holster. If you think about it, we do a lot of stuff with our hands up in front of our body, but we don't do a lot of stuff with our hands on the sides or especially not behind our body in the small of our back. So the closer you're going to be able to get to the center line when you think about where you're going to position that holster, the better off you're going to be. Now, that's going to be a comfort issue. Some people are not going to be able to carry right off their center line at that appendix position that we talk about. That might be uncomfortable. If you have a little bit more girth that you're worried about, then you might not be able to pull off that position. Depending on the contour of your hips, you might not be able to get right off your strong side hip. You might have to go slightly behind it. The only advice I'm going to give you besides get as close to your center line as possible is make sure that you don't go any further behind your hip than right behind it at that 4:30, 5 o'clock position. You don't want to go all the way to the small of your back because you just don't do a lot of things with your hands in the small of your back. So it's going to be a very awkward presentation. It's going to be a very difficult skill to develop to be able to present the gun from the holster efficiently from that position. So close to your center line as possible and not any further than right behind your strong side hip. So that's going to eliminate cross draw and things like that. That may look cool in the movies, but there's nothing efficient about drawing the gun from the weak side of your body unless you're wearing a shoulder holster or something like that, which really wouldn't be a great concealed carry holster unless you're Don Johnson wearing like a pink suit jacket or something. I don't see a lot of shoulder holsters anymore unless you're in a law enforcement capacity as a detective or something like that. And I don't think that's most of my audience here. So somewhere on your body, close as possible to the center line is going to be more efficient and never more than right behind your strong side hip, no cross draw, nothing like that. Once you've figured that out, it's really up to you at that point. Some good recommendations that I've got for holsters that have worked well for me. When I was carrying on my strong side hip, I really liked the Crossbreed Super Tuck, which is what I'm holding in my hand here. The Crossbreed Super Tuck has this leather backing on it, and then it's got the polymer piece that actually holds the pistol in place that's form-fitted to your specific gun, and it clips onto your belt with these belt clips. And you can get the U-clips that go underneath your belt if you want those. There's all kinds of options they've got on their website. And this is about a $75 holster shipped, and you can see here where I've cut this crude cut into it, and that's what Crossbreed refers to as a combat cut, and they'll do that from the factory if you tell them that you want it, which I'm definitely going to recommend that you do that, because if you have that piece of leather that comes on the normal Super Tuck, it's going to cover up a good portion of the grip right here, and it's going to have you give you problems getting a good purchase on it. So if you get that Crossbreed Super Tuck, make sure you get the combat cut, or you're going to find yourself doing your own combat cut and it looking like crap, kind of like my old Crossbreed does. You might think when you get it that the leather looks a little rigid and it might look a little bit uncomfortable, but it really is like a baseball glove. You know, you wear it a few times, wear it for a couple days, it's going to start to form fit to your hip, and it's going to be a comfortable holster for you. I would caution you, there's a lot of knockoffs of the Crossbreed design. There's alien gear and stuff like that. I've heard mixed reviews on those. Some people swear by them, but I've seen a lot of product quality issues with some of the cheaper knockoffs. So if you want the hybrid type leather and polymer holster, I would go with the original and get a Crossbreed. It always treated me well. They've got great customer service. Check them out. If you carry in the appendix position, my favorite holster is the Eidolon from Raven Concealment. It's basically an erector set that they send you for your holster. You can set it up configured in several different positions, but it's very good for the appendix position, because the problem you have with the appendix position is that the grip tends to stick out and print on your shirt when you're wearing the gun at the appendix position. But what this holster does is it's got this little wedge piece that your belt presses up against, and it torques that grip in towards your body. And it's also got this optional bumper piece on the back that forces the gun in towards your body as well. So it eliminates some of the printing issues that you might find with a traditional holster in that appendix position. From there, you've also got the option of like a paddle type holster. So if you're staging a gun for home defense or something like that, and you want to have a quick on and off holster, these paddle type holsters that go inside your waistband and just clip over the top of your waistband just like that are good on and off holsters to stage for home defense. If you want to stick your gun in a quick access safe inside of one of these holsters, that's a good go-to, so you can holster up and move around and be able to take that on and off real easily. But obviously the drawback is that it's going to be an outside the waistband holster, so it wouldn't be great for concealed carry in the public space. But for a home defense type holster to leave the gun staged in, I would recommend a paddle type holster. There's also belly bands. If you don't wear a belt very often, these belly band type holsters are really good. A lot of women don't wear belts, and sometimes when you're working out, you don't have pants that will have belt loops on them, and you gotta deal with elastic and yoga pants, that sort of thing. Belly band type holsters are good for that. These sit right underneath your waistband, and if you can cinch down a drawstring, then you're going to have good enough retention to keep this in the right place. So try a belly band holster if you don't wear a belt. And that being said, your belt is just as important as your holster. So get yourself a thick, rigid belt. So if you like leather belts, don't get the cheap Walmart belt. Get yourself an actual no BS leather belt that you would put like a rodeo buckle on for your gun belt. If you're okay with nylon, the thick woven nylon, this real rigid material is a really good gun belt. Aries Gear makes them at ariesgear.com. They make a belt called the Ranger belt, and they've got several different versions of that. Those are great belts. You can get either the real tactical looking buckles or the more subdued casual looking buckles, so that it's not obvious that you have a gun on. But get yourself a good rigid gun belt and don't rely on your Walmart special. There's also some options like the Raven Concealment Vanguard and the Vanguard 2. They're really non-holsters. You can call them a holster if you want. They meet the requirements. They fully cover the trigger guard. They retain the weapon pretty adequately. But the problem with them is obviously is that in a training environment, it's kind of a pain in the ass to reholster with these, because you got to physically take the gun, take the holster out of your pants, stick it back on the gun, and then stick the whole apparatus back into your waistband to reholster. So they're kind of a pain in training, but there's nothing wrong with them as far as for carry. If you want to go with that minimalist option, I'll use these sometimes depending on my wardrobe. If I've got less material on my shirt or something to conceal, these are a good minimalist option that still meet the requirements of a holster, even though they're really kind of a non-holster. That's my recommendations for holsters. Places to get holsters, crossbreedholsters.com for if you want to carry on your hip, and they've also got some appendix carry options too. My go-to for appendix carry, since I carry in that position, is Raven Concealment, the Eidolon holster, Eidolon, and also the Vanguard 2, the little trigger guard holster can be found there as well. And there's plenty of other places to get holsters, but those are just the ones that I've seen a lot of success with. So if they meet the requirements that I laid out, then they're going to be a good quality holster, and from there it's basically going to be your personal preference and how much money you want to spend. If you spend less than $50 on a holster, though, then you're probably going to regret your decision. If you go a little bit cheaper than that, you're probably going to have a cheap holster, and it's probably not going to work out for you, and you'll probably end up throwing it in the drawer and never wearing it. So, spend the money. It's kind of like buying golf clubs. Get something that's quality, get something you're going to like, and something that's going to be comfortable. But follow those rules, and we hope to see you on the range. Check us out at fundamentaldefense.com. Come see us for a defensive-focused shooting class, and bring whatever holster you picked out, and we'll figure out if it'll stand up to the test of training by running a few thousand rounds through your gun and doing 500 or 600 holster presentations. You're going to figure out whether that's the gear for you or not, and you'll be able to square it away by testing through training. So come see us, and hope that helps you guys out, and we'll see you next time.